Welcome on in, everyone. It's Malliem back with another weekly horror story. If you've got a story you'd like to share, feel free to post it to my subreddit linked below. Today's story is called Dead Girl on the Wall. If you enjoy the show, hit that sub button for me. It helps a lot. Thanks! The first time I felt it, I was 6 years old. My mom took me to a museum, showing me portraits of historical figures. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt. I had so much fun walking through the exhibits, looking at all the colorful costumes and the turn-of-the-century weaponry. I remember walking down one of the exhibits, pointing at all the men in the portraits. I went by them one by one, and I got this strange feeling. It felt like a hole in my stomach, causing this aching hunger, but not for food. It was very unsettling. But I only got it when looking at certain portraits. It only happened, specifically, when I looked at pictures of the dead. I hurried down the corridor, looking at them all one by one. Dead, dead, dead. Then, at the very end, a modern portrait. Employee of the month. But I was still getting that feeling. Once my mom caught up to me, I hugged her leg and pointed at the picture, crying, trying to understand. Mom, I said, pointing. There's a dead man on the wall. That's not a dead man, she said. He works here. No, he's dead. He's dead, Mom. Turns out I was right. He'd died in an accident a couple of days prior. My parents warned me not to talk about it. I don't think they ever fully believed that this was a real thing. They would dismiss my worries and roll their eyes when I brought it up. After a while, I started seeing it as this ugly thing, like something you don't talk about in polite company. And yet, even now, when I look at pictures of missing kids on the back of milk cartons and get that sinking feeling in my stomach, I know with certainty that their story won't be a happy one. It's not until you look back on your life that you start to realize how much something has affected you. For example, I never frame any pictures. My walls have nothing but abstract paintings or gaming posters. Nothing with real, actual people. I don't want to look at pictures of them, worrying about that sinking feeling coming back. It's unpleasant, even when I'm prepared for it. Even historical figures or celebrities, the feeling is all the same. Death is death. The longer the sensation grows, the longer it takes for me to get over it. I thought about going into law enforcement, but I never believed that my ability was real. Not actually really real, you know? The only people who knew I could do it tried to desperately shove it under the carpet, and after a while, you stop fighting them. I fully believed that it was all some kind of delusion, and that I was broken for even considering it to be real. But in my heart of hearts, I knew. I ended up as an illustrator. In my teenage years, I discovered my feeling doesn't work for stylized portraits or caricatures. It does work for realistic portraits, though, so I try to stay away from that. I got really good at semi-realistic Western comic style, and I had a fairly popular webcomic in the late 2010s. Had about 35K regular readers. I had to stop updating when I got a full-time job with a publisher. We're a team of illustrators doing a monthly magazine that's been going on for about 40 years. Point is, I'm blessed in a lot of ways. I live in a nice townhouse and I get to meet a lot of interesting people. I go to conventions all over the country. I'm invited to panels and I don't have to worry too much about where my next paycheck will come from. I love my job and the people I get to work with, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. But in the back of my mind, there's still that thing nagging me. The thing that keeps me from looking too close at the pictures on the walls or the old shows on TV. because every time I tune into a rerun of a game show or a feel-good sitcom from the 90s, my guts are screaming something at me. Dead, dead, dead. About 2 years ago, I was living on my own. I was coming home from work one day when I noticed someone moving in across the street. A man, 2 kids, and a truckload of stuff. He was struggling to keep a box upright. I saw the fragile label on the side and decided to offer a hand. Being a good neighbor is part of being a good Midwesterner. "You need any help there, neighbor?" I called out. "I think I might." The man struggled, and I caught the end of the box just as he relaxed his shoulders. I helped him carry it in, and he offered me a handshake. His 2 kids, about 8 to 10 years old, were way too busy running up and down the stairs and picking out their rooms. The man introduced himself as Carl. He'd been unpacking all day but was nowhere near done. I had about an hour before I had to be off, so I offered to help him with a couple of the heavier things. We moved a couch, a desk, a bed frame, and a kitchen table before I had to head out. Before I did, Carl stopped me in the kitchen for a beer. I'm not much of a beer guy, but when offered, you don't say no. "Appreciate it," he said. "Really do." "No problem. Glad to help." "Well, I'll be sure to tell the missus we've got one of the good ones across the street." He smiled. "She ought to be here by tomorrow. You should drop by then." "It's nothing, really," I said. "Don't sweat it." No, I insist. Dinner's on us." I took a swig of the beer as he put up one of the family pictures on the wall. All 4 of them, smiling at the camera. I think they were at the Grand Canyon. But his wife, there was something about her. Looking at the picture, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Long brown hair, hazel eyes, round cheeks practically meant for smiling. But all I felt was darkness. Looking away, I felt the pit in my stomach. There was no doubt in my mind. This woman was dead. Dead girl on the wall. I didn't know what to say. I think Carl noticed something in my demeanor shift, but he didn't say anything out loud. We finished our beers and went our separate ways as he carried in another box labeled Study. Coming home, I didn't know what to believe anymore. Maybe something had happened to her and he didn't know. If that was the case, should I say something? Or wait until he found out himself? In the end, I did neither. The next day, I got a knock on my door at around 5 p.m. I opened to see Carl and his wife. She had the same smile as in the picture. Same hair, too, albeit a bit longer. "Hey there, neighbor," Carl sing-sang. "Thanks for the help the other day." His wife shook my hand, introducing herself as Allie. I was confused. I'd been certain she was dead. This would be the first time my intuition was wrong. It was distracting, to say the least. "We figured we'd have that dinner," Allie said. "How about it?" "I haven't prepared anything," I said, vaguely gesturing at my kitchen. "You're the guest, don't worry," Carl said, giving me a pat on the shoulder. These people were definitely extroverts. I put on my shoes and let myself be escorted across the street. Allie and Carl were wonderful hosts. Their kids were noisy, but they mostly stayed up in their rooms. I was served rigatoni pasta with homemade sauce and plenty of Parmesan. Carl shredded it from a block of cheese right at the table. I was seated at the far end, with the family picture right ahead of me. I couldn't help but stare. There were about a dozen pictures up there. Carl and Allie bowling. Carl and Allie camping. Carl and Allie getting married. Allie had made little notes on them with a blue Sharpie. Best day ever. Memories for life. Dead, dead, dead. Dead girl on the wall. There was no doubt about it. In every single picture, that feeling returned. Getting that sensation in the middle of dinner can get me all kinds of awkward. So much so that I end up binging a little. Allie was nice about it, mentioning in passing that it was nice to see someone with a healthy appetite. It was a nice dinner all in all. We ended up talking for a couple of hours, getting to know each other better. Carl was in real estate, and Allie worked in car rentals and event booking. They had fairly seasonal jobs, so they had plenty of time to move and travel in the off-season. As Allie went off to check on the kids, I noticed something in Carl's eyes. His look lingered a little, and something in his smile trailed off. He shook his head and lowered his voice. "I'm glad she's doing okay," he said. "She was in an accident last year. Things have been a little, you know." I nodded. I could hear laughter and stomping feet upstairs. What happened? "We would tire going into a turn at 75 miles per hour. Went straight off the road. Goddamn miracle she made it with nothing but a couple broken bones. Car was totaled. Ended up in a river." I felt something cold inside me. I shook my head, trying to make my discomfort look like sympathy. "I'm sorry," I said. "I can't imagine." "No one can. Until it's right there." And yet, I couldn't explain what I was seeing. Allie was right upstairs, but everything was screaming at me that she was dead and gone. She came back down eventually. We had a couple glasses of wine, talked a little about our jobs, and called it a night. I thanked them, they thanked me, and we exchanged socials. 2 more friends on the list. As I was about to leave, I picked up my phone and called back to them. "Mind posing for a picture?" They didn't mind at all. Allie was all smiles as she hugged her husband. I took my first ever portrait with that phone, trying not to look uncomfortable. I waved and smiled all the way back to my place, but as I closed the door, the first thing I did was to bring up that photo. I looked at it over and over until there was no doubt in my mind. They were both very much alive. I tried covering Carl up with my thumb, but it didn't change a thing. In this particular photo, Allie was alive. But all throughout dinner, I've been looking at photos of a dead woman. I was sure of it. This brought up some questions I hadn't thought about in a long time. I tried to remember a time when I'd been wrong, but I kept coming up short. Ever since that first man in the museum, I've been accurate telling who was dead and who wasn't, just from a picture. There were a couple times I thought I might have been wrong, but they were either misunderstandings or I ended up being right all along. For the first time in years, I sat down and really thought about what this meant. I tried to look at a couple of pictures of people online, just to see that I was still able to tell dead from not. I checked a couple of news sites, along with some Wikipedia articles. Alive, dead, dead, alive, dead. Easy. No mistaking it. When I do sessions like that, I have to get up a lot and shake off the discomfort. It's like feeling a cramp coming on. At worst, it has made me physically ill. There was that one time in high school, while watching a documentary about the Second World War, when I got so ill that I had a seizure. They had to carry me out into the hallway, and paramedics had to give me muscle relaxant. I figured it wasn't a big deal. I was misunderstanding something, or not quite grasping the intricacies of my ability. There had to be some nuance to Allie. I sat down and tried to list the possible explanations. What if she had some kind of illness or condition that would have killed her, and the accident somehow fixed that? Well, my sensibilities have never detected things like that before. It works on a binary level, dead or alive. There's no difference between those living and slowly dying. That can't be it. What if she had an organ transplant? After all, her heart might be dead, but the body lives on. I looked up a couple of pictures of people who'd gone through heart transplants. I stayed up late looking at whether they were alive or dead to confirm my suspicions. I found a living person who had undergone a heart transplant, and they registered as alive. Pictures of the donor registered as dead. I went down the list, checking a thing at a time. What about people who've been temporarily dead? Well, if they survive, even the pictures of them in a dead state come back as alive to me. I feel their current status, not what they've been. I think it was 2 a.m. when I sat down on my kitchen table, drinking a cup of iced tea to calm my nerves. Looking out the window at the dark townhouse across the street, I could only come to one conclusion. I was looking at 2 different women. One alive, one dead. I try not to think about it. These people were practically strangers to me, and I had to accept the possibility that I was missing something or didn't know the full picture. There could be a misunderstanding. It wasn't the end of the world. I met Carl a couple times every now and then. We'd always go, "Hey neighbor," in passing, and have a little small talk. Harmless things. How's work? How are the kids? That kind of stuff. The kind of things you don't expect to cause a problem. But every now and then, I'd see something shift in his eyes. We once met outside the grocery store, by the parking lot. I dropped off a couple of bags and stopped to say hi. Carl was leaning against his car, taking a moment to breathe before he got behind the wheel. This time when I asked how things were going, he wasn't as quick to answer. Instead, he peered off into the distance. "It's tough sometimes," he mumbled. "You gotta make the best of things." "Cherish the little things," I said, trying to put a spin on it. Carl smiled, but kept his eyes firmly on the sky. He shook his head. "Ever since the accident, we've had to make adjustments. That goes without saying. But sometimes it's just a lot, you know?" "What do you mean?" "Well, like dietary stuff," he continued. "Allie had to eat more protein. We used to be vegetarians, but we had to make changes. Nowadays, it's all meat, meat, meat. Some days we cook separate dinners, but it gets tiresome. Twice the dishes." "Wait, you're vegetarian?" "We were, yeah." "That's quite the change." Carl shook his head as he pushed himself away from his car, putting his hands on his hips. "You don't know the half of it." Carl and I got pretty close. He didn't know a lot of people in town, and I don't have a lot of friends. Most of my friends from work are remote, and the few people I know around town are the kind that you only see for the holidays. It was nice to have someone around that you could just grab a beer with. The next few times I met Carl, I heard a bit more. Just little things, here and there. Allie would get up at night and not come back to bed. Sometimes he'd find her standing in the hallway, staring at nothing. But the details that bothered Carl the most were the seemingly unimportant ones. "She doesn't sound right when she sings in the shower. It's a stupid thing to notice, but it's there. He didn't have an explanation, other than how near-death experiences change people. He was incredibly grateful that she was with him at all, but he had to admit that it hadn't been a walk in the park. She scares the kids sometimes, he admitted. It's like she's there, but she's off. Over time, I did start to notice a couple of things. Whenever I met Allie in person, she would be all smiles and sunshine. But every now and then, I'd see her doing strange things. I'd see her taking out the trash, only to stop in the driveway, staring at nothing. Other times, she'd zone out in the middle of a sentence, only to smile and pretend it didn't happen. And one time, as I was up working late at night, I noticed something. I could see the light in her kitchen was on, and I could see Allie in her robe. She was bringing something out from the fridge and eating it straight from the package. It wasn't like you usually eat something. Her bites were furious and animalistic, like she was breaking the neck of some desperate prey. I was just sitting there, looking out my window. I didn't even consider the fact that my own light was on. I saw her tilt her head up, her cheeks full to the brim, and her eyes so dark I couldn't see the white. Then, for a moment, she stops chewing. Is she looking at me? I didn't know what to do. I just sat still, hoping she wouldn't notice. I held my breath, counting the seconds. Then she raised her hand and waved a little, one finger at a time. A couple of nights later, Carl invited me over for another dinner. We were going to watch an animation project that I'd worked on a couple years prior, but I think he was just starved for normal company. The kids were up and about as usual, playing on their phones upstairs. Allie, on the other hand, was on her best behavior. We were just about to start the show when Carl had to use the bathroom. For a moment, I was left alone with Allie. I was sitting on the couch, and she was on the sofa. She just put down her drink on a little blue sunflower coaster. Then she just stopped. Hands still on the glass, leaning forward, staring straight ahead. Just like that. Checked out. I looked at her for a couple of seconds. Then her eyes turned my way. Nothing else. Just the eyes. Don't look at me like that. Her voice had a lower register. Not by much, but enough. I'm sorry, I said. Are you okay? How can you look at me like that? She continued. What do you see? Her hand trembled a little. The ice cubes clinked. You see it, don't you? Without thinking, my eyes shot to the portrait on the wall, then back to her. She connected the dots as her smile faded. She didn't say anything. She just let the words hang there as she stared at me. Allie let go of the glass just as Carl returned, and her smile snapped back up like a stretched rubber band. After that night, Allie would look at me differently. Whenever no one was around to notice, she would drop the facade. Nothing too obvious, just a relaxed facial expression, a drooping smile, a little tension sinking from the shoulders as her posture changed. She did this thing with her head that I hadn't noticed before, where she would constantly move her neck, sort of like a dog trying to get a better read on its surroundings. She was being less subtle about it, almost playful. She knew I was seeing something, and it's like she relished it. It came to a point one night as I was heading to bed. I went room by room to turn off the lights when I got a bad feeling. I was standing in the kitchen in nothing but my underwear and a t-shirt. Then I turned to my left. Allie was standing right outside my kitchen window, her face pressed against the glass in the biggest, widest grin I'd ever seen. I fell back, knocking over the dishes on the counter. She did a quick 4 taps on the window and let out a shrill cackle before she stepped away and disappeared around the corner. I sat there on the kitchen floor trying to calm my nerves. I closed the curtains on all my windows and checked twice that everything was locked. I tried to avoid them after that. I didn't want to accidentally be left alone with Allie again. I wanted to tell Carl about what had happened, but I didn't want to get involved. Also, there was a slight chance that I might just make things worse. Instead, I tried to distance myself from them and put more time and energy into my own life and my own worries. I had things going on too. Even then, I couldn't help but hear things. There were notices on boards around town about someone breaking into storage lockers and trash containers. There were a couple of pets missing from their yards. One neighbor was complaining about how someone's damn cat was leaving half-eaten birds in the yard. I wouldn't have thought twice about it until I saw that a couple of notes had marks on them. Someone had drawn little smiley faces with a blue Sharpie. I didn't know what to think about Allie. I didn't know what she was or what she was doing. There was something abnormal about her, but I hoped she would just leave me alone. For a while, I thought she did. Then, I woke up to a half-eaten bird left outside my door. I decided to go talk to them. Not just her, them. Carl had to hear this too, and I needed to get this out in the open. I stormed across the street and knocked on the door. One of their kids opened, which made all my anger screech to a halt. "Yeah?" the kid said. "Is Mom or Dad in?" "Mom's out back. Dad's at the store." "I'll wait for Dad then," I said. "I'll be back in a bit." "Wait." The kid grabbed my arm and looked up at me. He pulled on my sleeve. "Can you come look at something?" he asked. "Please?" How could I say no? He walked me to the kitchen and pointed through the glass door in the living room. I could see Allie outside. She was standing on all fours, making a strange choking noise, like she was throwing up. She repeated it over and over. "She hasn't done that in a long time," he said. "It's weird. You should tell your dad about it." "He knows." I turned to the kid, stepping out of view. I didn't want Allie to see me if she suddenly turned around. "Has Mom been like this for a long time?" "Ever since the accident." That checked out. All the pictures I'd seen of her from before the accident registered as dead. All the pictures after registered as alive. The kid was right. Something had happened after that accident. "I'm going to talk to them," I said. "Don't worry." "Please don't." "Why not?" "Because then we have to move again." My heart stopped for a moment as the glass door in the living room slid open. The kid grabbed my arm and hurried me out the front door. The moment the door closed, I heard the mumbles of a discussion. Seconds later, the kid was running up the stairs, and Allie was heading to the bathroom. I turned back home without a second thought. I didn't feel safe in my home anymore. I would hear rustling in the bushes outside. At one point, someone tried to open my front door. Sometimes, when I went out to get my mail, I would notice there were little blue Sharpie markings in the corner of the letters. The occasional smiley face. sometimes happy, sometimes sad. Whenever I spotted Allie, she would turn to face me like she knew exactly where I was. She could be getting ready to drive her kids to school, and then she'd just stop and stare at me. She and Carl could be going inside, and he would have to pull her to keep her from staring at me. This one time, she dropped an entire grocery bag. A couple of lemons rolled into the gutter. She didn't care. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't know what to say. They hadn't done anything, and I couldn't claim she was actually dead. I mean, she wasn't. But maybe she was. One night, as I was heading to bed, someone knocked on my door. It was unusually straightforward, so I went out to see who it was. Without opening, I called out, "Who is it?" Carl's voice came back.
"I wanted to apologize,"
he said.
"Can I come in?"
I reached for the lock, but something in the back of my mind told me no. That kid had said something that stuck with me. He knows. How much did Carl actually know? I took my hand away from the lock.
"I want to apologize for Allie,"
he continued.
"She's not herself."
What exactly do you mean by that?
I mean...
He took a moment to compose himself. I heard a metallic clang as something sharp tapped against the door.
I mean, we had to make adjustments.
I don't want a part in this.
It's not up to me. She's got her eye on you, and that's... it's something we have to consider.
He paused again.
You can start by opening the door.
He continued.
We'll talk.
That's not gonna happen. Carl stepped away. I watched from my kitchen window as he walked across the street. I could tell he was holding something in his right hand, but I couldn't tell what it was. Something sharp. I caught a glimpse of Allie as Carl opened their front door. He pushed past her, hanging his head low. There was a garbage bag poking out of his pocket. Even then, Allie was looking my way. I decided enough was enough. I was going to get some distance and either call the police or move. I wasn't about to mess with these people anymore. I didn't want to get involved. As soon as the shops opened, I went to get some supplies. My dad had a fishing cabin by the river out west that I could stay at for a while. I could work remotely. The place had Wi-Fi. I'd be okay. I loaded up my car with gas and supplies, heading home only to get some clothes. I looked over my shoulder to make sure no one was following me and hurried inside. I locked the door and hurried into my bedroom. I opened the wardrobe and reached for a shirt. A hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. My heart skipped a beat as I jumped back, choking on my own spit. Everything in me screamed at me to run, but I was stuck in an iron grip. It was Allie, looking out at me with her dark, unblinking eyes. They had a tinge of yellow to them. I'd never seen that before. Her mouth was wide open, and she was panting like a dog in short bursts. She was visibly excited, and I could feel a tremble in her hand. She was a lot stronger than expected. Just as I was about to scream for help, her other hand shot up and grabbed my neck. She pushed me up against the wall as Carl walked in from the other room. "He sees me," Allie hissed at him. "You promised." "We're not sure he does," Carl sighed. "We have to know for sure. Part of the promise." Allie rolled her eyes, but it was barely visible. She eased her hand off my throat, putting a finger to her lips. I had to be careful. "What exactly do you know?" she whispered. I took a moment to consider. I could tell her about the blue Sharpie markings, the dead birds, the midnight visits to the fridge. but I turned my eyes to Carl instead. "I know she's dead," I wheezed. "And I know that's not Allie anymore." He raised an eyebrow, then looked at her, then back at me. "What do you mean?" Allie's eyes went wide. She must have been telling her husband a different story. The two of them exchanged a glance. "What the hell do you mean?" Carl repeated. Before I got a chance to respond, Allie's hand was back on my throat. She held out a hand, as if asking Carl to hand her something. He didn't. "Let him answer," Carl muttered. "Let him answer, then we'll deal with it." "He said enough." "What does he mean you're dead?" "It means nothing." Carl was holding a knife. Allie reached for it, but Carl pulled back. Frustrated, Allie smacked my head against the wall, causing a cascade of red to flash in front of my eyes. My legs gave out as I lost my balance. I must have been concussed. The world span as I sank to the floor. She walked up to Carl and reached for the knife. He stepped back. I could hear them arguing back and forth. He was trying to get a clear answer. She was trying to get the knife. I got the impression that she'd been looking forward to this for some time, but Carl was hesitant. They must have had some kind of arrangement. If someone found out about her, they'd deal with them. But exactly what there was to find out was still up for debate. At some point, I managed to blurt out a couple of words. "Allie's dead," I stuttered. "That ain't her. It ain't." "Why is he saying that?" Carl asked, pointing at me. "Why is he saying you're dead?" Allie started growling, straight up growling like a cornered animal. She lunged at Carl, snapping at him. It surprised him enough for her to get a hold of the knife. She pulled it from his hands, got down on her knees, and put the blade to my neck. She could barely contain herself. Carl tackled her off. Something burned against my chin, and I could feel something warm welling up, trickling down my cheek. Allie smacked against the wall as her growling turned from a shrill yip to a deep rumble. "Is that even you?" Carl asked. "Is there anything of you left in there?" There were no words. I got the impression that they'd had this conversation a couple of times, and things had reached a breaking point. Allie opened her mouth even wider, and something in my vision shifted. It's like my eyes crossed over and the proportions moved, but I was completely still. Her jaw extended out of her skull, like an elongated jaw was trying to reach out of her human shape. They got into a fight. She pounced at him, throwing the knife away. Her joints looked wrong somehow, like they were trying to bend the other way. She got a big bite out of Carl's leg, but he managed to kick her off. They scuffled a bit as he headed for the kitchen, leaving me alone on the floor. I got my phone out and dialed for help. Thank God there was a shortcut on the lock screen. There was no way I could have done it otherwise. I heard an operator pick up as my kitchen was trashed. Dishes hit the floor along with an assortment of cutlery resting on the counter. Allie wasn't even making human noises anymore. It was all growls and snarls. I just mumbled for help, trying my best to answer the operator's questions. I can't remember a single one. I nodded in and out of consciousness. I heard the operator asking for my attention, but my eyes were resting on the kitchen. I was on my side, looking at it all wrong. It's weird how different something familiar looks once you tilt your head. Not just the kitchen, but the people in it, too. She was not a neighbor from across the street anymore. She was not Allie. She was not a human, either. Her head was the wrong shape, and her hair had grown into some sort of mane. She'd opened my fridge and started to go into whatever raw meat was in there. A pack of bacon, among other things. Carl got a kitchen knife and headed back towards me. He leaned down next to me, holding his arm. He winced a little. He had bite marks. "What do you mean, she's dead?" he asked. Allie was tearing at the plastic, smacking something to the floor, and biting pieces off of it. "The accident," I mumbled. "She died in the accident." "How do you know?" "The pictures," I said, vaguely gesturing towards their house. "Different in pictures." He nodded. Maybe he'd seen it too, but in another way. He raised the blade toward me, but couldn't go any further. He sighed, burying his face in his hands. "You're right. You're right." He noticed my phone. He saw the number on the screen and shook his head. There was tiredness there. Something that ran deep into his bones. Carl had to pull Allie away from the fridge, holding her under his arms like he was carrying a stray dog. He threw something out the door, and she chased after it like her life depended on it, laughing all the way with that weird cackle. The last I saw the two of them was Carl carefully closing my front door and saying something from the other side. I think it was an apology. By the time the police arrived, Carl, Allie, and the kids were already gone. They took the car and drove off. They left a fake license plate in the driveway. By the time the police realized they skipped town, the fire alarm went off. Turns out the couple didn't want to leave any clues behind. They set the place on fire, bathing the entire street in smoke. I had to get new carpets. I also had to get stitches for my head and about a month off work. It was investigated as a home invasion. Turns out a lot of things about Carl and Allie didn't add up on closer inspection. They cut a lot of corners and signed a couple of things with fake names. One of those names was that of a person who died in a fire a couple of months earlier. This whole ordeal came from spotting that one dead girl on the wall. I've spotted plenty since, and I suspect I'll spot plenty more. I don't know if what I did saved me, or if it just got me into trouble. But I'm still breathing, so I'm counting it as a win. I'm not sure what Allie was exactly. From what I learned, she came from a small rural town in South Dakota. She kept mentioning a Jessica, like a sister or a friend. Her accident happened near a river. I'm not sure how it all ties together. I'm not a detective. Not a cop, you know? I'm just a strange guy who gets a strange feeling when I look at pictures. I'm writing all this down to try and convince myself that not only was it real, but what I am and what I have experienced is equally real. I can look at a picture right now, and that feeling is still there. And I know for a fact that both Carl and Allie are out there, although I suspect their names might be different. How do I know? I got their photo on my phone, and I can feel that they're alive.